All right, great. Well, welcome to Sarah Henry and the first in our series of interviews of editors. So the reason that I've asked Sarah and other editors to come on with me is because a number of people, over the past few years have asked a lot. Well, they haven't asked me because I don't know have a lot of experience with editors, but they're constantly kind of wondering about it and asking each other about editors and how to work with editors and so on. And so that's why I wanted to kind of, gather as much information as possible to be able to support the scholars. So thank you for coming on, Sarah.
Absolutely.
So if you'd be willing just to start by sharing a little bit about your story, like what brought you to this place and what brought you to becoming an editor?
Absolutely. So it's a little bit of a long story, but I'll do my best.
Time. No rush.
Edit it down, right?
Yeah.
So I spent 15 years in university administration, working mostly with college student leaders, student organizations, Greek life, sport clubs, diversity programs. And really, because of a very transformational college experience, that was kind of where I first just kind of stumbled upon my purpose, or the way that I really felt like I wanted to give back, which was to be supportive to students from all backgrounds, and really I wanted to ensure that students always felt like they had a home with me, that they were in a place where they felt like they could learn, they could grow as leaders. That was really, really important to me, and I think that's what propelled me into higher education. And so I worked in student affairs specifically for about 15 years, and then in 2012, I was up in Northern California at an institution in Northern California, and I learned that my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and so she had been, at that point, she was in her early 60s. They thought that maybe she would have 2.5 years to live if we were lucky. And that was just devastating, of course, because I had spent my whole life not really thinking about my parents' mortality outside of right. when they were in their 70s or 80s, but not
right.
in their 60s, right? So that was kind of, okay. But I was, just devastated. And so I was in a community that was smaller, and I needed to really wanted to be in a more urban environment where I had access to a major airport, so I could get back and forth to Phoenix as often as possible. Okay. So I did a career search at that time. I ended up working at an institution in the Sacramento area. And during that job, 13 months after learning of my mom's diagnosis, my dad was diagnosed with terminal colon cancer.
Wow.
So I had both parents in Phoenix. They were still married, but both in their early 60s, essentially navigating chemo together and alternating weeks. So literally one parent would be sort of strong enough to help take care of the other parent in the off week, and so on. And they were also trying to take care of my grandmother, who at the time was 90. And between my brother and me, we just had to make a decision and kind of determine, okay, which one of us is going to make a life change here and move home. And my brother is a Catholic priest, so he didn't.
Hard for him to move.
Yeah, and we needed all the prayers, and we needed the closest connection to God possible. So I was like, you stay where you are, I'll step down and I'll move home. Wow. So I moved home to be with my mom and dad. Moved in with them, really became their full-time caretaker for a period of time, was also helping to support my grandmother, who was in an assisted living facility, but definitely needed family time and connection. And so during this time, I wasn't in a position to work full-time, and I quickly realized that I had a lot of downtime. I was cooking a lot, cleaning a lot, going to doctor's appointments with either of my parents or my grandmother at the hospital, getting, prescriptions or whatever. But in these visits to the hospital or to the doctor's appointments or in just sitting around the house while my parents napped for like hours on end.
Right.
I had this time and I was like, well, I'm going to go bananas if I'm watching that however many months, right? Like there are only so many series that you can watch, and this isn't actually doing much for my brain, you know? So I'm like, this is what I want to be doing for however long I'm in this sort of situation with my family. So I had, my mom was a librarian. Her name was Becky, as we talked about.
Yes. Oh.
My mom was a librarian, and when I was in 8th grade, I had an 8th grade English teacher who really wanted us to be responsible consumers of knowledge. So it was important to him that we learn how to give credit where credit is due, to cite authors appropriately. And so we had 5 papers in our 8th grade year. They were each worth 20 points. And so he asked us to decide whether we wanted to use MLA, which is from the Modern Language Association, or APA from the American Psychological Association. And my mother, who had done her master's in library science, learned MLA. And so she knew MLA, but at the library, she would get questions from patrons about APA, and she didn't know APA. So she said, well, honey, why don't we learn APA together? Because that will help both of us. You'll be able to do your projects and I'll be able to learn more information so I can help the patrons at the library. And in that, a little 12-year-old editor was born. Now,
that's so cool.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I was first typing those. This was like circa 1992, and we didn't have a computer yet, so I was typing these on a Lexmark 1000 IBM typewriter. When you make a mistake in APA on a typewriter, it's way different than when you do it on a word processing system. So I was already a little type A, overachiever. I wanted everything to be perfect. I joke that I'm a recovering perfectionist, even though I'm an editor, but that was at that point in my life at 12, I was like, oh, this APA stuff is like, this is it. Like, this is amazing, right? Because it was all of these details that I got to use to make my writing better. And I just thought it was amazing. And I took to it. I loved it. I thought it was super interesting and, helpful and whatever. And so I used APA in high school, in my undergraduate degree, as a communication major, and then in my master's program in education, and then in my doctoral program in higher education. And I probably was a student who liked editing my dissertation more than I liked writing it. I mean, I was working full time while I was getting my doctorate, and when I had my downtime, or the time where I wasn't like mentally or conceptually at my best, I would use my downtime to edit because it was productive. And I still felt like I was making progress. But there weren't as many editors around back then. It wasn't as popular as it is now to be a dissertation editor. And I don't even know that I thought to look for one back in 2010, so this is definitely different. But anyway, so going back to being at my parents' house, I thought, I could, as a way to kind of stay intellectually stimulated and engaged in my field, to stay connected to my colleagues who are a part of professional associations that I've been in for the last 15 years, I could reach out to some of the folks that I know that are in doctoral programs and just offer to help them with their dissertations. And it wasn't as a revenue generator. I just thought, like, this is better than watching Schitt's Creek or whatever, right? In my mind, I was like, I don't even know that was a show yet, but in my mind, like, reading dissertations was actually more intellectually beneficial than watching whatever the hot show was at the time. So I reached out to a couple of my colleagues, and I had no hourly rate. I had nothing. I just was like, I don't want money. I just want to help a couple people, so that I have something to kind of keep myself busy and engaged. And then I started getting calls from people that I know. Word spreads. And I was like, well, shoot, I can't like do this for everybody for free. Like, now this is getting a little unreasonable. So I kind of thought, well, maybe I should, if I'm just going to do this as kind of like a side thing for a while, like just very casual. Yeah. I could like do some research and kind of think like, what would this look like if I were to charge an hourly rate or whatever. And that was in 2015, 2016. And even so I got to Phoenix to take care of my parents in May of 2014. I only had about 10 weeks with my mom. So my mom passed in July of 2014. And then my dad, they were like the love of each other's lives in college. They grew up together. And after my mom passed, my dad very much felt like his purpose for living was gone. And so he had actually, in my mom's final sort of weeks, he had foregone additional chemo treatment because he wanted to stay as strong as he could to help take care of my mom, which then advanced his cancer. So he actually really sort of, gave up treatment so that he could be as strong as possible for my mom, which ended up leading to him passing earlier than probably he would have otherwise. But he ended up passing about 6 months later in January of 2015. So I stayed in Phoenix. I was doing a little bit of editing work, but it took us about a year to do all of this sort of like end of life stuff that comes with losing two people. So, and I was taking care of my grandmother. And so it wasn't until the spring of 2016 where I was like, okay, now I'm done with this, the caretaking, all of the legal and the financial matters have been settled. Now I need to kind of think about what's next for my life. And so that summer I actually had been grocery shopping, and I came out to the car, which was my parents' car. And I went into the glove compartment and I found a lifetime senior pass to the national parks that my dad had purchased for my parents to travel. And of course they never went on the trip because they passed away. So that was sort of a sign to me that this was the next step of my journey, was to go through the national parks in California and eventually take the trip for them. So I was like, that's my next step. Like, I don't know, I need some time. I've been doing this now, not the editing, but just doing the caretaking and everything for 2.5 years. And I need to kind of give myself some breathing room. So I packed up the dog and the tent and the stuff or whatever, and packed up the CRV, and off I went. And so that summer, which was the summer of 2016, so like 5 years ago, I had two students at that point that I was helping, only two. And Phil was just kind of thinking that I was going to go on this journey, eventually start applying for jobs again in a traditional sort of on-campus capacity. And then I got to, as far as Portland, Oregon. And if you've ever been to Portland, Oregon in the summer, I think that's when most people decide to move there. But the problem is that 8 months of the year, it's nothing like that, right? So it's actually, so I was like, oh my God, Portland's amazing. I'm going to move to Portland. So I moved to Portland. The first time in my life, well, the little bit of the backstory to this is that my plan was to camp all the way until I got back to Arizona.
Okay.
What I didn't realize about the Pacific Northwest is that it's still raining and it's still cold in like June in the like mountainous areas, right? So I get there thinking I'm going to camp, and it's like freezing cold and it's raining, and I'm like, oh, I'm not doing this. So then I'm like staying in hotel. Anyway, I was staying in a couple of hotels, and finally I get to Portland. I'm like, okay, I need to switch plans here, because I can't camp in this, right? It's too wet. So I was like, I'm totally free of responsibility at this point. Like I never really wanted to live full time in Arizona. I grew up there, but I wanted to sort of pick my city and then build my city from there. And so I decided to try Portland. So I get to Portland, and I had been through so much with my family that I literally, in my mind, the editing thing was still sort of hanging out up here as like, this is fine for now, but it's not like my life's work. And I thought to myself, gosh, I would love nothing more than to like work at Whole Foods, because I'm a big health and wellness person. Like, I'd love to work at Whole Foods and just like stock fruits and vegetables for like the summer until I figure out like what I want to do for my life, right? Like, that sounds like a really good idea. Well, I made a totally bonehead move, and I submitted my 7-page administrator resume with my application to Whole Foods, to which they promptly said, no thanks. So I literally am walking. I remember this, like, I remember getting the email. I'm in the Pearl District in Portland, and I'm like walking home. This was like July-ish of 2016, like basically 5 years ago. And I'm walking, and I'm like, I guess I'm going to have to give the editing thing a try. So my team jokes to this day that the reason the company exists is because Whole Foods said no.
Whole Foods said no. That's right.
Yes. I was overqualified for the produce section, and now I have a company.
That's incredible.
So I literally, like, the next day after I, like, brushed myself off from, like, my embarrassment for not being hired by Whole Foods, I went into town and I went into a coffee shop and I hadn't looked at the sign. So I just walked in and I said, okay, well, I need to, like, think about what I'm going to call this. If I'm going to do this, I don't want to just be Sara Henry. I want to be like, I want a name that kind of embodies my values. And I had never really sat down and like thought about what my values were. I had as a person, but I hadn't thought about them as, like, how they connected to my work.
Sure.
And how they would serve as a foundation for my practice as a coach and as an editor. And so I went to this coffee shop and I sat down and I had a legal pad and a pen and I thought, okay, what are all of the descriptors for how I want students to feel from working with me? Like, what does it feel like to be engaged with me in this relationship? What does it feel like to go through this process? What is it? Because I didn't want it to be technical or transactional. That was really, really important to me. Everything I had heard was that it was this very technical, very transactional process. And I knew that I couldn't commit to that for my life. That wasn't meaningful enough to me. And it felt like it was more focused on the bottom line and the financial aspect of it than the actual transformational capacity of that relationship. And so, so I wrote down all of these words and, like, I'm like, editor, blah, editor, like trying to, like, put it together, and, like, nothing was working. And then I looked up and I saw this rack of paraphernalia for the coffee shop. And it turned out that I was at Heart Roasters. And so I saw the word heart on a cup, on a mug. And I was like, heartful, right? Like that, like heartful, that's it, right? And I'm like, and it works because it's not actually a word. So it's made up. And the funny thing is when you write it, you have a squiggly line under it. And I'm like, that's perfect. So I immediately went online and I, like, checked for the URL and I checked social media, and it was available and it was available. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's, like, this is it.
It's meant to be.
Perfect. It's totally meant to be.
Yeah.
So I, like, booked the the URL for the website. I did all the things, and I was like, this feels like the right thing. It feels like it's an action. It's a way, and we use it internally throughout the company. Like, how are we being, what are ways that we could have been more heartful? How do we make sure that we're showing up with that heart in every interaction that we have, and in our coaching relationship with students, and even in our pointing out things within the editing process, right? Like, all of that is done with a deep care and concern and respect for the student as an individual. And that's exactly what I wanted, which was really cool. So we, that was the fall of 2016. We were starting to kind of move in terms of getting more and more students requesting support. Kind of fast forward to now, there's a lot of journeying in there, but we have a team of 50.
That's incredible.
Academic coaches and editors who are all doctorate educated from the social and behavioral sciences. We have 15 campuses that we support nationally. So we have formal campus partnerships that are all different depending on the campus. So some of them work more with master's students, others more with doctoral students, sometimes a combination. And we also work with faculty at those campuses on manuscripts for publication and making sure that those are ready for production, essentially. And that's it. It's a wild adventure every day. But when it all sort of comes back to the name, and I think I shared this with you, the heartful editor is really a testament to my mom, who of course I lost to cancer, but she was the first person in my life who taught me what it meant to be an educator from a place of love. And I think we've always seen ourselves as a team, as educators first and editors second. And while we all know APA like the back of our hand and whatever, like, it's that educating from the heart that I think is really core and central to what we do as a team. And that love and that heart is on the team too, which is really fun. Like, I just met with my leadership team and we're just like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. And how are you doing? And oh, did you see Allie's baby? And so it's just a big love fest all the time. And it's a lot of fun. So
That's so lovely. I mean, it's so incredible, the whole story of how you kind of found your calling, and being able to infuse it with your values, right? And have that front and center, that it is the heartful part, right? It's funny because I was looking for bookkeepers like 2 years ago and ended up finding, I think her name is like the heart-based bookkeeper or something, but it's like heart-based book, and it was like, oh my God, that's the one, and just like, I mean, who would have thought that you could bring heart into something so concrete like bookkeeping or editing?
Yeah.
But when you do, it is transformational, right? Like it does feel so different, and I don't know, so much more embodied, right? Because it's not just editing, like you're editing a part of me almost, right?
And
right? The stuff that I have been working on for
students, it's vulnerable for them. This is your baby, kind of. And like people even joke, like, I feel like I'm handing over my child to like daycare.
Yes.
It's very emotional, and you feel like someone's going to be looking at your work and giving you feedback. And it's like to be fearful that someone's going to give you feedback that's going to make you feel like you can't do it, or that you are like somehow demoralized as a person, or that like why? That's not helpful, right? And so I think there's a way that we can deliver feedback and provide coaching to students that lifts people up and helps them to really like work toward their strengths. So anyway, it's just.
Wait, so I actually want to kind of dive into that. That was further down the line in my questions, but I'm going to dive into it since you brought it up. Just how do you do that? Like, because for so many scholars, right, it is incredibly painful. Well, first of all, they're dissertations. I mean, I work with dissertation scholars, and it's so personal, right? Because you had to pick it, and it's such a significant part of your identity for many years. And it's so scary because it's very different from any other project, right? So handing over my baby to daycare, right? Like, and then you handing it back to me. And for so many, like that reception of the edits is overwhelming. It shuts people down. Some people, everyone's got, kind of their different modes. Someone will look at it and then put aside for 2 weeks. Some, okay, now I've got them back. I'm going to wait 2 weeks before I'm even going to look at it. Okay, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to write all, the list of all the edits, and then I'm going to wait a week. Like it just, because it's so emotional to get back those edits. So what is it that you all do to, I mean, it sounds like you're very attuned to that. So what do you do to support that understanding?
It's such a great question. And I think, we start pretty much with any doctoral student who, as an individual, contacts us to access support. I still, to this day, we're 5 years in, and I still have a 30-minute meeting with each student. And it's really, it's for so many reasons, but the main one is that there are so many nuances affecting the dissertation process, right? The writing process. I mean, how is this personal for the student, right? Like, what was the motivator for the student doing the research? What was it that they experienced in their life that led them to want to explore this particular topic? What are the dynamics like on their committee, right? What are the challenges that they feel like they're having, and where are their stumbling blocks? Like, so we spend a lot of time in that like relationship development process at the beginning, so that we're really sure, like, how do we then wrap around the student and provide them with the support they need? Not in just to send us your paper, here's your edits, right? There's so much more that happens before we get to that step. And then from there, from that meeting, I put together a very detailed project description on that particular student. I share that with the team. The team can understand what is the student's research about, what are the things that we need to be focusing on, what's the timeline, what might be some of the, maybe we have committee member 1 and committee member 3 that are, attitude about something, right? Like we need to.
So you ask that in the interview.
Oh, yeah.
Again, you're my first editor interview, but my understanding, I don't think I've heard of that happening before. It's like, I mean, is that uncommon that editors do that?
I don't know.
Okay. I'll loop back to you in a month and let you know. But I think that's pretty unique.
I sort of gave myself permission to like do this in the way that my heart told me to do it. And so I was like, well, what are the things that I want to know? I want to understand, let's say it's Becky, right? I want to understand what's happening in Becky's world that help this dissertation to get to the final draft, right? In the the best possible condition, right? There's no such thing as a perfect dissertation, but in the best possible condition, right? And often yes, there's APA, and yes, there's writing coaching and other things that need to happen, but there's also like often all of these other things around it. And it can be a very lonely process the whole thing can be lonely, but what we often find is that students can be more lonely in the last 2 chapters, because that tends to be where the support starts to fall off a little bit at a lot of campuses. Yeah. And so we don't see ourselves as just like, all right, well, give me your paper and I'll do this and then I'll send it back to you. It's like, wow. Okay, well, where are you? What's your support network like right now? Like, right. Do you feel like you have the support, the more emotional support that you need to kind of carry you through to the end? So that's why we put so much into the relationship with our students. We often attend students' defenses. We often, oh, wow. Lots of things like that we do to just really be there till the end and really make sure that those final, even the edits that the campus sends back at the end, if there's little things here and there that come back that are formatting, or like something transfers in a PDF and it gets knocked off or whatever, that we're still there, to like not ever let the student get to a point where they're like, oh my God, I don't know like how I'm going to do this, because you don't go to an EDD or a PhD program to learn how to format a table of contents. This isn't.
Right. That's right. That's not the point.
That's not it, right? Like, you've done the work. Like, it's time to celebrate and like go have a glass of wine with your friends and be done. Right. So, So, and then our process then is to, we use a team approach for everything. So we always have a lead editor with one of our directors. And that's a couple of things that come into play there. One is that none of us are perfect, right? We're all imperfect. The APA manual is 427 pages. So, if I've gotten 7 hours of sleep instead of 8, well, it's possible that I might miss oxygen trauma. That's real, and we're not going to pretend that it's not, because it is, right? Like, people do things. And so we always have 2 people on the project, so their strengths and talents can work together to help the student reach the very best dissertation. As everyone knows, we just went through a pandemic, and we had team members their lives were affected by the pandemic, and they had to attend to family members who were sick or whatever the case might have been. And so because we have 2 people on every project, we can assure that nothing will happen with the timeline, because we always have 2 people that know exactly what's happening with the project. And we're not interrupting the flow because somebody gets sick or somebody has a child that is now homeschooling that they're like trying to figure out what it might be. So those are the types of kind of supports that we built in. And then we have a process that we take every dissertation through from the beginning to the end. Of course, every dissertation is different, so that process sometimes shifts depending on the student. But there's a lot of tracking changes, of course, but there's also a lot of just sort of asking questions about, we noticed you said this up here, and does this need to be it looks like there's a discrepancy. Can we clarify that? And we do a lot of question asking. We do a lot of, making suggestions for the student. The student is ultimately the owner of their dissertation. So, offering guidance and suggestions in places where we think that there might be room for some improvement or some clarification, for example, or strengthening the narrative or making sure the argument is stronger or those types of things. But it's never to make a student feel like they've ruined their dissertation, or they're not a good writer, or they don't belong in the academy, or they can't complete their dissertation. Because honestly, so many students get that kind of feedback from their faculty that it's not, why would we add to that? There's no point in that. And oftentimes that feedback comes from a place of tremendous power and privilege that isn't taking into account the full scope of who that student is and what their training and background has been like in writing in general, right? There's a lot of students who enter doctoral programs who haven't necessarily had really strong writing, teaching, and instruction, and we recognize that. So we don't feel like it's our responsibility to point out to somebody that like anything other than you're doing a really great job here, and here are some of the places where we think you could maybe strengthen this, that, or the other thing, and here's some guidance for how you might go about that.
Yeah. And so how do you help me? If I send you, a draft of my dissertation and you send it back with a bunch of edits and I freak out, is there any way that you can support me in that, or how does that go?
So we always, in any email that we send back to our students, we always let them know that we're available to talk by Zoom or over the phone to kind of go through edits. And then we also check in pretty regularly. So after the edits go back, we'll check in and say like, hey, I just wanted to see if you've had a chance to look over the edits. You know, do you have any questions? Is there anything we can, answer for you? So I think just being as available as possible and then being open to additional coaching as necessary. We always do an overview too of all of the edits that we do. And there's usually some explanation or instruction in there so that students, when they open a document, aren't like, well, why did they do that? Right. And instead here's the edit. And then this is why we made the edit, because APA advises X, Y, or Z. Right. And that way has a pretty clear understanding of like, this is why you'll see this throughout the entire paper, for example.
Great.
Now, in some cases, right, it may be, I'm trying to think of a good example, but sometimes, a faculty member on a committee might have a very specific request for something to be formatted a certain way, or the student may decide that they want to format a term in a certain way because it's more aligned with their research population or, their discipline or whatever. And so we're certainly supportive of that. So if there's something like that where we might be confused, rather than changing it for the student, we would ask the question and say, we noticed that you formatted this differently than APA does. Was that intentional? This is the guidance from APA, but if this was intentional, let us know, and then we can honor that throughout the rest of the document.
Right, great.
There's a lot of that back and forth. And the editor,
That's beautiful. So, okay, I'm going to back up a few steps. So I'm a student and I'm struggling. And how do I know when it is, or maybe I'm not even sure if I'm struggling, but maybe somebody told me I need an editor, or maybe I don't, I'm wondering if I need an editor. Like, how do I know when it is that I need to start talking to someone or either learning about editors or hiring an editor?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's generally hard for a lot of us to ask for help, right? To recognize that we need it and to ask for it. I'll just be fully transparent that I was diagnosed with sort of late in life ADHD. Well, this was news to me because I realized, when I was like, here I am as a relatively high functioning person, but putting a lot of systems in place to manage myself, right? Not knowing that there was anything of note. And when they suggested that this might be what was happening, I was like, isn't that like 5-year-old little boys that I ADHD? Right. But then I just had this moment of like, okay, I'm like, I think I could use some help with this. This is fine. Like, I'm accepting that these are the challenges. I'm accepting that my purpose in life is to help as many scholars as possible complete their dissertations. I have a beautiful company that I just love more than anything. And so for us, as an organization, to continue to move forward, I have a responsibility to do the work that I need to do to make sure that the things that are hard for me are less hard and that I'm able to do this work. And so I think in a similar way, it's sort of saying, okay, like, I really care deeply about this population. I really care deeply about getting this work out into the world or making an impact in this way. So if I'm coming up against some challenges, that's okay. We all have them, right? Like, that's not a thing. So what are the things that I could be doing to help overcome some of those challenges during this process? And that could be any number of things. And then identifying what that is. And that could be hiring a coach like you. It could be hiring a therapist. It could be hiring an editor, or right. Like, there could be a lot of different people that sort of need to be part of the village, right? To get over whatever those challenges are. And I think specific to editing and specific to academic coaching, writing coaching, I would say, if you start to get feedback on papers, even as part of your coursework, and it either kind of shuts you down or you're not really sure what to do with that feedback, that would be a good time to start looking for an academic writing coach who is specifically someone who can work with you at the graduate and doctoral level. So probably not the campus's writing center for undergraduates. I would probably identify, right? Because then you're talking about going in and having someone who's maybe 21 or 22 or 17, right? This is their student job. And the writing is different at the master's and doctoral level, right? So you really need someone who gets it, who understands like how to interpret faculty speak in the margins and help you to decode that and make sense of it and then develop a plan with you so that you can move forward. We get a lot of students at coursework. who've been out of school for a while, maybe have been working professionally for a long time. They get admitted to a doctoral program. They write their first paper. Even students who have been A students their whole life. They got through their undergraduate degree and their master's degree, and they're like, I got straight A's the whole way through, and I got into my doctoral program. I wrote my first literature review, and then I got torn apart, right? And they're like, what the heck is happening, right? And so we get a lot of students that kind of have that, that oh shit moment, or that, that moment of like, oh, this is different than what I'm used to. I need to get maybe some help here. So that's not uncommon. And in that situation, I would talk to the student kind of about what their what they feel like their challenges are, what they've been told their challenges are. Right? Then communicate that to the team and find someone on the team who could work with them in sort of an ongoing kind of as needed basis on course paper, all the way through, if they want to, all the way through the process. I would say the most common thing that we see is students coming to us with a pretty solid draft of chapters 1 through 3, for example, written and mostly approved by their committee members for content, because we're not content advisors, we're writing coaches. So we don't advise you on, you need to add more to your methods section, but we can help you articulate what needs to go in the methods section in a way that will make sense to your to your chair and your committee. So we get a lot of students in those first 3 chapters who want to provide a polished draft to their committee. So their chair has said, but before it goes to the committee, I think we need to tighten up kind of the nuts and bolts here. And then that way, when we get it to the committee, they'll be able to focus on the content and not be distracted by all of the technical errors in APA and grammar and other types of writing. So we either get papers like dissertations around the proposal stage, sometimes before, sometimes after. So sometimes students will contact us and say, I just successfully defended my proposal. Now I'm completing my IRB application. I'm going to conduct my research, but I don't want to let chapters 1 through 3 collect dust. I'd like to go ahead and start working with an editor on cleaning up chapters 1 through 3, the references, and then I'll send over chapters 4 and then chapter 5 once they're ready to go. And that helps enormously, because we are able to get a lot done before we get closer to the dissertation defense. And which is really nice, because usually students, when they get to their defense, they're done. They're ready.
Over it. So over it.
So I just want to have another 3 or 4 weeks of editing after the defense. Oh my gosh. It's like, So,
and I want to put a pitch in for people, who, I was going to say who, but I'm going to say almost anybody, that if they're open to working with an editor, to start early. Because I know as as a dissertation chair or committee member, for me, as I'm reading through, I'm a super detail oriented person, and I get frustrated when I come up against little things, and it's just so I'm sitting there doing the editing, which is totally not my job, and it's not and they might be getting rid of sections anyway, so it's a waste of my time, their time, but I kind of can't help myself, right? And not that I'm a professional editor by any means, but it's just sometimes I can't even understand it unless it's got the grammar in the right way, right? And so it's or just things are repeated, or it's when it gets I'm just going to say, as a reader, I get caught up on it, and then I get a little judgy. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I get a little annoyed, and I'm not as kind-hearted in the reading, right? Because I'm like, God, didn't they read this thing? Which they probably read it 1,000 times over and just didn't catch stuff, right? Because you get so into it. So from the student side, I totally get how you can send stuff in like that. But from the from the professor side, I just know how frustrated I got in reading stuff that just kind of felt messy to me, right? Even though part of me knew that it was not my job, that wasn't the point of me reading it, was to clean things up, but I couldn't. But it got in my way just because of how my brain works, right?
Yeah, I tell students, your committee members are faculty because they have content expertise in a certain area, and that expertise is beneficial for your development as a scholar. Now,
right.
if you put 427 pages worth of APA errors in front of them, they're not going to be, you're not letting them fulfill their life's purpose, which is to help content.
I love that.
Right? But you would help me fulfill my life's purpose by putting all 427 pages of APA errors in front of me, and then I clean them out, and take the document and send it to your committee, and then they're able to focus more intently on the content, that's their job, right?
Yes.
So you want them to not be distracted as they're reading your work. You want them to be giving you feedback on your argument's not tight enough here. You're not thinking about conceptually, like there's some pieces missing. I'm not following your line of thinking. Like those are the types of things that you want them to be calling you on.
Yes.
Not APA.
Right. Got it.
Not APA. And we have faculty that are like, oh my gosh, thank gosh you looked at this before I read it, right? Because so grateful that they're not spending hours on end trying to like fix these little technical errors. So
right. So one of the concerns that scholars have brought up is it okay to hire an editor? Like, is that cheating? Is it, because I mean, when I went through grad school, like I don't know that anybody hired an editor. I mean, just don't think it was a thing. It's a long time ago. Today, I know there's some schools that require you to have an editor. And then there's everything in between, right? But I have had some scholars, voice a concern of like, is that okay? Like, is that cheating, or how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's important to know where the line is, right? I think if you conceive of an editor as somebody who's going to be editing your content, right? Like think of like a book editor, right? If you hire a book editor, they're going to be in there moving stuff around. They're going to be helping you with the writing. Our job is to help you with a very specific technical skill, things like commas and the placement of dashes. And are you putting the page number in the right place? And are you, right? Like these are superfluous to your content, right? But they're very helpful for your content, right? You want those things to be tidied up. Like we said, so that you're not getting, your faculty members and your readers aren't getting distracted by your writing. And then from a coaching standpoint, again, we're coaching you on writing strategies. We're not coaching you on, okay, how do you write this paragraph on this particular topic? That's your work to do in conversation with your committee, because this ultimately is your dissertation. So I think that's how we would articulate this, is that the part of the process that can ethically be outsourced is what's superfluous to the actual content of the dissertation, right? We're not producing papers for anybody. We're not writing anything for anybody, right? This is really about how do we give you the tools that you need to be able to write your best dissertation, and then help you with those little mechanical aspects of APA, which is kind of like a language. I mean, I've been working on my fluency in APA for 28 years, right? You can't expect somebody in a doctoral program in 3 years to master APA at the level that is expected of the social and behavioral sciences if there's not appropriate support provided within the program. And often there's not. Usually programs are like, you need to learn APA.
Yes.
Well, what am I gonna do when I'm working full time, managing children, trying to be a spouse or significant other, taking care of aging parents, and you want me to learn all of this? And I actually, in having done this work for the last 5 years, would tell you that not everybody has the same ability to edit the way that we do. Not meaning just Heartful Editor, but there is a technical, very structured, very detailed way of thinking that helps people to be very good at working as a professional editor. And not everybody has it. I mean, I've seen papers come through where the content is just lovely, but even when I get very, very specific feedback on APA that even almost mirrors what's in the APA manual, the student cannot apply it to their own work. It's just not the same part of the brain. So I think that the level of detail that this requires, and again, going back to like the formatting pieces, like, are we really like, is setting up an auto formatted table of contents cheating? Like really, like, or the title page, like I'm not right, anyway. So I know that there are purists out there that certainly hint at that this support is sort of more than doctoral students should get. But I'm also a realist, and I understand what students are contending with in their lives, and the number of things that they have to manage. And I think that if we know where our line is, and we know what is ethical, what we're able to from the standpoint of academic integrity, what we're able to support students on and not. And most campuses have writing centers, and most campuses have academic support programs to help students navigate their academics. And so I really see Heartful Editor as an academic support service. We just happen to be off campus, but we have 15 campuses that are all prestigious universities that are either require it and or provide this and pay for it out of the campus's budget, pay for this support. So
that's amazing. Yeah. So do editors need to be well versed in different fields of study in order to edit? Like, if I'm in psychology, do I need to have somebody that knows my field in order to edit my paper?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would actually, I would say no, because we're focused on writing strategies more broadly, not on content coaching. So yes, it would be important if I were on your committee to be able to coach, to provide guidance to you on your topic, but and I need to be able to think with you, about your topic in order to coach you on that. But to provide you with writing strategies, with organizational strategies, with APA editing, those types of things, that's certainly not something that requires a student to have the same discipline as the coach or editor. Sometimes we are able to make a match that way, which is just kind of fun, to have two people come together that have a similar background. Like, for example, we just paired a student who's doing a study on collegiate volleyball players, and we have a former collegiate volleyball player on our team, and so we made a match based on that, just so they can geek out over volleyball together. But that's kind of cool when that happens. But the editor's role is not to coach on the student's content and help them think about more broadly about their, what they're writing about. That's the committee's job.
Okay, great. One of the most asked questions that I get is fees. How is that determined?
Sure. So we have just a straight hourly rate for our doctoral students. So we have a $45 an hour rate. It's actually incredibly low in the market. We do that on purpose. I would say that the average is probably closer to 60, anywhere from $50 to $60 an hour, and I've even seen as high as $75 an hour. So we have done that intentionally because our one of our core values is access. We want students to be able to access the support, but we do need to make sure that our team members, who all have doctorates, are paid a fair wage for their work. And we have found that the hourly rate is the best way to be fair in both directions. That if we were to charge, for example, a flat fee of $1,500, and somebody doesn't need that much time, then they're going to pay more than they have to. So that's not fair to the student. And then if somebody else needs more than what $1,500 would cover, then it's not fair to the editor, because they're putting in more time than they're getting paid for. So by just having a flat hourly rate, we're able to sort of mitigate that, and that way students are just paying for exactly the number of hours needed on their particular dissertation. We are very flexible as an organization in general with payment. So we allow students to sort of pay as they're able to toward the balance. There's no fine print anywhere. It's just a way for us to recognize that when you're finishing a dissertation, the last thing you need is financial stress. You also don't, we don't want anybody to think of this as an unexpected car repair. I remember once driving from San Diego to Phoenix. I was 25 years old. Of course, I had no money because I was 25. And I'm driving across in the middle of summer. I'm going from San Diego to Phoenix, and my carburetor or something breaks in my car. And I had no choice but to pay it, because I had to get to Phoenix, I was in the middle, I was in Yuma or some place like that. And so I just remember that experience of putting $2,500 on my credit card. Whatever it was, and feeling oh my God, that was the worst. And I'm sitting in this, this car repair place in the middle of the desert, and it's hot. a dog on my lap and she's panting and the whole thing. And I'm like, I never want anybody to feel that way about this process. And so we work with students in a lot of creative ways to make sure that they're able to access this support. Students can pay over time if they need to. We have students that pay sometimes as little as $25 or $30 a month, depending on their particular circumstances. So, we're large enough now as an organization where we can manage that, and so it's fine. But it's just a way for us to really commit to that value of access and make sure that the financial piece is not standing in the way.
Yes.
A scholar who has tremendous work, right, and needs the support, that they're able to get that work out into the world and to finish their doctoral program without the financial part being a burden for them.
Right. Perfect. So if I have, if I send you my dissertation and you said you have a 30-minute phone call, can you then give me an estimate of how much it's going to cost? Or?
Yeah, I can usually, we usually base it on, usually on like page length to some extent. I mean, I can kind of ballpark it based on like about how long is a dissertation, what we're looking at in terms of references. Usually I will have an opportunity to look at the paper before that. But most of the time I would say a typical, now we have dissertations that are 80 pages and dissertations that are 400 pages. So when I say there's an average, that's some big polls on either side.
Yes.
But I would say typically for like a dissertation in compliance with APA 7 and the campus specific guidelines. So that's the other thing that we do all of that. Do the content, we do references, we cross-check everything, we do all the formatting, we make sure that the dissertation is literally submission ready and able to meet the guidelines of the campus. So in that, there is usually a separate dissertation formatting manual from the campus, right? That is above and beyond the APA manual.
Right.
And we do all of that for the student. And I would say a typical dissertation, which we'll ballpark that at like 150 to 175 pages. I would say probably comes in at like the 25 to 30 hour mark total from start to finish. Now that can be lower or higher depending on the length, the complexity, and the condition of the paper. So as an example, we had a dissertation recently where the student had only labeled some of her tables and figures and others were just sort of laying throughout the paper. So and none of them were called out in the text. So just the process of going through and figuring out what needed to be where relative to the text. We worked on this, but still it was a process, right? So what needed to be where relative to the text, what needs to be labeled, what order are they in, getting everything labeled. I mean, that probably added 10 hours to the project just because it's so complex. And there were like 45 figures, 30 tables, right? So like, and they were all over, they were literally all over the map. Like we were like, oh my God, like what's going on? So that was a very complicated project, but that's an anomaly, right? We don't get those.
Right. Yeah. Wow. So if I work with you, can you just give me the steps? So I call you, I set up a time, we have a half-hour phone call, and then how often am I sending you things? How often are you sending them back? What's the turnaround time?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we would you would contact us through the website, through heartfuleditor.com. We have a contact form there that comes directly to me, and then I would reach out and set up a time for us to connect. Excuse me, I just had like a little tickle in my throat. We would set up a time to connect, and then we would walk through everything over the phone. So we talk about our process. I'd answer any questions that you have. I'd get to know you a little bit better, your topic, your research, all of that, just so I have a good understanding of what your timeline is, what your needs are.
Right.
Talk about the financial part. And that's the other thing we talk about during the call is kind of, what is sort of, are there any financial parameters that we need to put on the project in terms of do we need to limit the number of hours? Do you have a firm budget in place? Those types of things, because we want to make sure that we're respectful of that. And then we do ask students if they're able to. Not everybody is, and that's totally fine. But if they're able to, we do ask students to do a deposit for the first 10 hours of support. So we would follow that call up with a welcome email that has our deposit invoice and our editing overview, which provides just sort of a more like transparent kind of play-by-play of how the process tends to unfold behind the scenes.
Great.
We ask students to just read that and acknowledge it before the work begins. And then I send out a project description at that point. We usually have 10 to 12 hours or whatever for the editors to respond that they're interested. And then at that point I make a match, and then the first step of the process begins from there. There's back and forth throughout the project because there are multiple steps. So we start with sort of a cleaning process of the document, sort of an initial sort of preparing the document for the line by line review, and that process happens first. So there's usually a couple rounds of back and forth throughout. And that's really, one, because we want to maintain that relationship with you. It doesn't feel very good to send something in and then not hear from somebody for 3 weeks. So we keep regular communication with the students to keep them updated on our progress, on what we need from them. Sometimes there are things within the dissertation that are missing that the student needs to do on their part. So for example, if there's DOIs missing, or if we get through the reference check and there's references missing that need to be in the reference list, those are things that we would communicate to the student and help them to just know where they need to do some work to update their dissertation. And then in the line by line review, as we go through and we're reading the document more closely for, deeper issues in writing or APA, there could be, for example, places where we're like, we're either maybe this is a sentence fragment, or I'm not making, you said this up here, but this contradicts that, or you have repetition that's pretty close together. Was that intentional, right? There's all sorts of things like that come up during the line by line review that we would then comment on in the margins and then share that feedback with the students so that they can address those issues within their chapter.
Yeah.
And then once all of that is done, that can take, usually we say on average about 2 to 3 weeks total from start to finish for a full dissertation. Now, usually we're starting it. We don't always start with the full
earlier.
Sometimes earlier, in which case then we're on the student's timeline at that point and kind of stretching things out. But usually if we get a full dissertation, we're usually looking at 2 to 3 weeks. On average, again, a 400-page paper is going to be very different in terms of turnaround.
Right.
Because we just need more time, and there's only so many hours in a work day. So I would say that's about average.
God, who wants to read a 400-page, dissertation? That's amazing. Okay,
gosh, information about a lot of topics.
Oh my God. A lot of really random, minute information about a lot of topics.
I joke that I'm a hit at cocktail parties because I can literally strike up a conversation with anybody about anything.
Yes. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Here we go. Within 5 minutes, you're like, I know about blah 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 blah. And then off I go.
That's so fun. Okay, so as we're starting to wrap up, I want to ask: are there any particular tips or tricks or strategies that you would offer to doctoral students who are in the midst of writing their dissertations?
Yes, I could probably write a book, but I will try to keep this. So I would say, first and most importantly, is to know what your why is. Why are you doing the work?
Yes.
If you're just doing it to get a promotion and make more money, that it's going to be hard to sustain yourself to the final submission. So I think really connecting with your values, really understanding who is the community that you want to serve? Who are you doing this for? Whose lives are you hoping to impact through this research and through your scholarship? Because when stuff gets hard, I think it's important to come back to that and remember that it's worth the struggle, because on the other end of this, you're actually making a difference in the community in some respect. I like to joke that nobody writes a dissertation on how to make the world a worse place. At least I haven't read one. So I'm sure they're out there, but I haven't. We work with the social and behavioral sciences, so pretty much everybody's a change agent and is wanting to make the world a better place. So most of the time students have a very specific, I want to make schools better in this way. I want to be a better support in this way. And so when you know what that is, I think that can be really powerful for making progress and staying on track. And I also think that it can help you to kind of remove some of the annoyance that can come with APA when you realize that APA is not there to drive you crazy. It's there to help you make a difference, because you're removing distraction from the heart of the manuscript, which is ultimately your message and the impact that you want to have in the world. So if you leave all that messiness in there and somebody reads it, they're like, well, I'm just not going to read it because it's too distracting to actually focus on the work. I would also say to try to focus on progress over perfection. Get comfortable with sharing rough drafts. I try to embrace myself as a rough draft, right? And that we're always learning, right? There's always more to learn about ourselves. There's always more to learn about who we are as writers, how we write, how we can improve as writers. Some stupid APA thing that's on page whatever that you didn't know. Okay, well, maybe I didn't know it either, right? And I do this professionally, right? There's just so much out there. So I think just really focusing on making progress and knowing that there's no way that you'll write a perfect dissertation because it's not possible. Right.
Oh, so helpful. That's
the last thing I would say is to map your work to your energy. So I am like ready to go from like 6 a.m. to 2, and then I start to shut down. So my mental work, the things that require the most of me, I have to schedule from 6 to 2. And then all of the other stuff that needs like 85% of me or 75% of me, I schedule for another time. And the reason I say that is that you know when you do your best thinking, so that's when you should be writing.
Yes.
All of the other little things, you can still make progress during your other time, but do things that don't require all of your mental capacity. So maybe that's alphabetizing your reference list. Maybe that's looking up DOIs. Maybe that's, right, like in making sure all your paragraphs are indented without using the space bar. Like whatever it is, right? Like those are things that you can do when you still want to be productive, but you just don't have as much of the mental energy that you need for things like writing.
Right. I love that. Sorry, I got a little caught on the indenting without using the space bar. I was like, how would you use the space? And I was like, you literally use this space? Oh, that's very funny. Okay.
We just had a dissertation, actually. We indented like every paragraph in the dissertation. It was every single one was indented with the space bar. And I was like, no, the tab key is
there for a reason. Use that easy button. That's fun.
But these are all like technical skills, right? That not everybody.
Exactly. I mean, if no one ever taught you, how do you know, right? I mean, if you don't know the tab, you don't know a tab key, right? So there you go.
That's right.
Any last things that I should be asking you that I haven't asked you? Anything that came up for you that you're like, oh, I want to make sure I say that?
I took a couple notes and
great.
I was gonna say something I was thinking about was like what to be kind of looking for when you're hiring an editor. And I think I think that making sure someone honors your agency as the writer. So it's listening to you and is putting you first as the writer. I think if you decide to work with someone, whoever that might be, like just make sure that they're honoring your voice and letting you be you should be in the driver's seat of your dissertation. It's your dissertation, right? So making sure that if someone is helping you, that they are helping you on your terms, right? Yes. And letting you be the driver of what you need, and they should respect that. They should respect you. They should respect this as a relationship, as a very vulnerable process, right? These are all things that that you hopefully feel from the person. But that ability to listen to you and to honor your voice and respect you as the scholar, I think is huge. So
yes. Well, and one thing that I was thinking about is that, as a therapist, when people want to work with me, I always have a half-hour phone call with them beforehand, just to like ask them what they're looking for, in their therapy, and then share a little bit about what I do in my work, and together come to see if we might be a good match, right? Because in therapy, the relationship is critical, and I can imagine that with this, I mean, especially the way that you were talking about it, that I guess people could do editing without the relationship, but it sure would be way more fulfilling and supportive and just wholehearted, and embodied to be able to have that relationship. And so being able to check in and find someone that they feel connected with, to me, feels really important.
Yeah. And it is an emotional process.
Oh God, yes, right.
It's
I mean,
so
and
emotional.
people quit. I mean, people because it gets to be too much, right? So if I can have my support team, right, my
Yeah.
editor, my coach, my coaches, a decent committee member, but maybe if I don't have a good chair committee, then I can go out and find those people, right?
Yeah, I
It's
sometimes say to students, like, it's kind of like an act of self-care, right?
yeah,
You
yes,
can only carry so much. So
right,
like find the people in your life that can help you carry whatever
right,
it is that you need help carrying. And
yes,
for a lot of people, and this is why we do this work, a lot of it is like, I just can't open the APA manual and apply all of that to this dissertation. It will kill me.
right,
And
right,
if I try to do it, I'm not going to be thinking or spending the time that I need to spend on my chapters 4 and 5, because I'm just going to be focused on editing and I need to be able to finish the dissertation, right? So
yes,
I think it can really feel, and the students often say this at the end of a phone call with me, they'll be like, I feel like I can just like sigh a breath of fresh air, or I feel like a
yeah,
weight has been lifted off my shoulders, like just knowing that somebody else is going to be there to help me
yes,
with this, and I sometimes use the analogy of like a marathon, right? We've probably all seen the end of a marathon where, you've got really tired runners at the end of a marathon at the 26th mile, right? And they're trying to get through the finish line. And sometimes people that have either already crossed over or are near those runners will literally come over and put their arm on the runner and help them get over the finish line. And they're still moving their legs, but they've got a little extra support. And the difference is not finishing or finishing with a little extra support. And I think that this is a marathon, and sometimes we need to have an arm around us to just help us, like, just jump over the finish line. And it's totally fine.
Yeah, that's a beautiful image. I love that, because they run the whole marathon, right? I just need a little bit of help right at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
beautiful.
Oh,
Thank you so.
Yeah.
So nice to meet you and to hear from you and to learn from you. It's just, it's so cool to be talking to somebody else who is in the work of trying to support scholars to get their dissertations, to get their doctorates, right? So they can move on and fulfill, whatever the rest of their calling is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much for giving us the time.
So happy to meet you. I, of course, I've been a Becky fan. I follow your, I get your emails and I follow you on social media. And so when I got your email, I was like, oh, well, look at the celebrities coming to me. This is so cool.
You're so great. Really appreciate that.
Like Jennifer Aniston or something, like in my inbox, like wanting to go have lunch.
I got to tell you a funny story. I don't know. Do you watch Ted Lasso?
No, it's on the list. It's on the list.
Oh my God, greatest thing of all time, right? And the season 2 was coming up, and so I rewatched season 1. I am not a series rewatcher. In fact, I've never rewatched a series, ever. I watched Avatar about 30 times, but other than that, like, I'm not a rewatcher. And I did because I loved it so much, and then, like, the day before it came out, I got an email from Ted Lasso, from him personally, right? So Apple sent me an email, but it was from Ted Lasso saying, "Dear Becky, I'm so excited. I hope you're going to join the team, be on the sidelines watching our team." And I was like over the moon, like running around with my computer. Ted Lasso wrote to me. God, that's funny.
That's so funny. Oh my God, I love it. Well, thank you.
So you must watch it anyway.
I will. Oh, it's on the list. It's definitely on the list. We are actually, the reason I mentioned Schitt's Creek is we're a little Schitt's Creek obsessed right now, but I think we'll add Ted Lasso. It took us a little while with Schitt's Creek, which I heard was a thing. Like,
I still can't do it. I want to do it. I can't. I got to try again, because I tried like twice, my husband and I, and we just kind of couldn't get into it. So I think I need to give a little bit longer.
Well, and we're like quick to be out. Like, we'll get Ozark. We got to a point, and then I'm like, all right, there's nothing more that they could do to a human that's disgusting and gross that, like, I want to see. So I'm just done, right? Like, I'm completely done. Like, I get it for the shock value, and now I'm like, I'm out. So
right.
You actually get to the end.
My son said, "Ozark is so great, you'd hate it, Mom. Don't even try." Yeah. I'm like, okay. I'm out. So just to say that that we got someone that's been listening to us and said that it was great, and she may contact you to edit her proposal. So I hope.
Oh, lovely. Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. So once again, you can be reached at
www.heartfuleditor.com, or you can reach out to me directly. It's totally fine. It's Sara, my first name, Sara, at heartfuleditor.com. And we'll, I'm sure, have contact information out there somewhere.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Totally. I'll attach that wherever this goes.
Awesome. Sounds
great.
good.
Thank you so much, Sara. Really appreciate your time.
Bye-bye.